G'day everyone, come take a seat if you're in the foyer, if you're sitting around, come take a seat. I just want to say a big welcome to everyone that's come along tonight, the people in front of me, the people on the live stream. It's so good to have you, and hello to you in the future if you're watching this at a later date. So I just wanted to spend a little bit of time talking about what Way of Life is actually about, what's the philosophy behind it. And essentially it's that we believe that everyone picks a way in life, and what way that you pick actually is important, and it's good to wrestle with what way you're actually going in life. So this is why we do these kinds of things. We actually want to help you wrestle with different topics and different ideas. And one of the main things that we would believe is that Jesus, he claims that he is the way. He's the way, the truth, and the life. And we welcome you to wrestle with that and to wrestle with these different topics as well. So tonight we have a really, really special speaker. I've probably spammed each and every one of you about this. But we have John Mark Comer. He'll introduce himself a little bit in the video. But he's from Portland in Oregon in the US. He's a pastor of a church called Bridgetown, and he's written a whole heap of really good books, but we're going to be talking on the topic of hurry. And then for some of you, like, oh, what is that? What even is that topic? So we're going to find out about that tonight. I really encourage you guys to take notes. Be intentional about this space. Wrestle with these different topics. See what's resonating with your heart, where you might want to change. And then we're actually going to head on into the hall for those of you who are joining us for a bit of food. And even if you don't want the food, I encourage you to come over. We're actually going to be doing some table talk. So we're just going to wrestle with some close friends or some people to actually discuss what we've actually been listening to. So you're super welcome to come to that. There's plenty of food. They're cooking up a storm in there. But I do encourage you, for those of you who are at home, we're going to put the questions up. They're pretty general questions, but I encourage you, even if you're by yourself, to wrestle with these questions and to do that with the people in your house. But without any further ado, we pre-recorded this because the time difference is crazy. If we were actually going to do it at this time, it would have been like 11:30 at night on a Saturday for him. So it didn't quite work out, but I hope you enjoy. I had a whole heap of fun doing it, but without further ado, here we go.
Well, John Mark Comer, it's so good to have you on Way of Life podcast. Thank you so much for coming on and giving of your time. I genuinely really appreciate it, and it's just so awesome to have you on the show.
No, it's great to be here. I just wish I could be with you in person. It's winter. We're here in the Northern Hemisphere. Yeah. It's winter. And the idea of Australia right now sounds amazing. We just came through a winter blizzard and we lost power for 4 days almost to the minute. So it was freezing cold.
Oh no.
So
it's the opposite over here. It's really hot.
I know. You're wearing your t-shirt on the other end of Zoom, and I just feeling a little jealous, I'm not going to
lie. Well, before we get into, I really want to pick your brain about your book, The Ruthless Elimination of Hurry. But before we get into that, I thought we'd do something a little bit of an icebreaker, something a little fun. So obviously you're in Portland, Oregon. If I said that right, in the USA.
Yes.
Yes. I'm in Brisbane in Australia, Vegas, to the locals. And so I wanted to play a little bit of a game around how much you know about Australian slang.
Okay.
I know you've been here a couple of times.
Right.
You might have a heads up a little bit further down the road than some people. So I want you to say for instance, you had a friend with you at your church and you had to translate these slangs. I just want you to do your best. Is that okay?
Oh yeah, we'll see how far I get. Maybe not nowhere. We speak in full words here in the United States of America, not the uni-stuts or whatever, whatever you would call it. I love it.
Alrighty. So if I say to you, hey mate, chuck a Yui down there, what am I saying? Hey mate, chuck a Yui down there.
No idea. I mean, hey mate, hi person, friend. Chuck a Yui, is that like a U-turn?
Oh, we got it. Yeah, it is a U-turn. So that's
Yeah, Chuck. I've not heard Chuck. Yui make. I've heard that, but Chuck, I've not heard that. Chuck a Yui, not make a Yui, not take a Yui, Chuck a Yui.
Chucky U. Yeah. No, we love our slang. All right, I've got a couple more.
Okay.
This one's a bit harder, but if I said to you, I just had a prang, but the towies are on the way, what am I saying?
I have no idea. You're kidding me. That's real. That's you're not making that up.
No, this is a real thing. I've just had a prang, but the towies are on the way.
Okay, what is it?
I just had a car crash, but the tow truck's on the way.
Okay, so help me with this. Slang makes logical sense for words that you use all of the time and experiences that are common. You know what I mean? To just shorten it, like a person you talk to all the time, a nickname. Yeah. A car crash, hopefully you never have one, or maybe you have one and two in your entire life. Why do you need a shortened version of a car crash? Did that common in Australia or something?
Yeah, probably, yes.
Oh my goodness. All right, last one. Let's see if I do any better and redeem myself.
This one, you might have a bit better of a chance on this one. So when I say, mate, chuck another couple of snags on the Barbie, what am I saying?
Put another something on the barbecue, but I don't know what snags are.
Snags? Have a wild guess.
Steaks, maybe hamburgers.
There's
hot dogs, sausages. There you go.
Snags. Check another.
This is okay. So the last I will chide you for your improper grammar, but I adore Australia. I love Australian culture. And my last time I was in Australia, I was staying with this wonderful Australian family, or we were hanging out with them, and they put on this like video called "How to Speak Australian." Have you seen that?
Oh yeah. I've seen that. Yeah, that's fun.
And apparently it was done by two youth pastors. I don't know, but it wasn't a Christian video. It was just a video. And I thought it was. I'm watching it with like 10 other Australians. Are all watching this.
Yeah.
And it's just like this goes through every single slang word they can think of, and I don't even remember these. So they clearly was not exhaustive. And I was like, started laughing, like, this isn't real. Like, you don't actually say these words. You know what I mean? Like, oh no, every single one of these words we say.
It's so funny. I so appreciate Australian culture for this, just for this kind of thing. It's just so unique and funny. Anyway.
Oh, wow.
Thank you so much for giving me a giggle on that one, mate. But I wanted to get into the serious stuff, you know. I wanted to spend a little bit of time, maybe about 15 minutes, see how we go on the problem of hurry. So you mention in the book that one of the greatest problems of our day is hurry. And but you even recognize, and kind of when I started reading the book, I'm like, hurry, like that's one of the most like crazy like epidemic type things of our time. Like it's not normally what you'd kind of pick. Maybe you'd pick like injustice or like poverty or racism or something. But so I wondered if you could explain this idea of hurry and tell us why it's actually so detrimental. Like, what is it and what kind of effect is it having on us?
Yeah, you know, the book is named after a quote, or based on a quote that just rocked me years ago by the philosopher Dallas Willard, who once said, he called hurry the great enemy of spiritual life in our day, and then said, you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. And yeah, my experience was the same as yours. Like when I first like came across that saying, on one level, like there was this deep resonance, like you must ruthlessly eliminate hurry from your life. There's a deep like inner tuning fork kind of yes. But then like his logic of it's the great enemy of spiritual life in our day, I was like, really? Like the great enemy? I mean, I live in, again, Portland, Oregon, which if you know anything about America is like one of the most secular, far left, and honestly over the last year, one of the most disturbed cities in the world. Yeah, right. For sure in the Western world and for sure in America. All right. And so like I was thinking like, hurry? Like, yeah, exactly. I would have made a list of, I don't know, the top 10, and it would have been all the things you said and a bunch of other ones. And I don't think hurry would have even made the list.
Yeah.
But the longer that I sat with it, the more I really came to agree. You know, if you think about the New Testament's triad of kind of virtues and inner dispositions of the heart that form kind of the interior life of a disciple of Jesus, if you want to summarize them with the New Testament trifecta of love and joy and peace, which I would argue are the byproduct of the kind of Pauline faith, hope, and love. If you think about that, all three of those, if you want to call them virtues or inner dispositions of the heart, love, joy, and peace, are incompatible with a life of speed. So if you think about love, we could talk about each one, but if you think about love, you know, all of my most unloving moments as a dad, as a husband, as a neighbor, as a pastor, as a friend, are almost always, not always, but almost always when I'm in a hurry and I don't have time to give somebody attention, compassion, to serve them, to sit with them in their pain, you know, cue the, like, for me, I've, you know, 3 kids right now, like just trying to get them out of the house anywhere even close to on time is almost always an exercise at unloving fathering. You know what I mean? Like, get in the car, hurry. I don't have time. Talk to me later. Stop crying. You know, like, have an emotional breakdown later. Get in the back of the car. You know, like, we're late for church. I have to preach on hurry or whatever. And, you know, so we could go down the list, you know, joy, like all of the experts on joy say that it's about basically gratitude, but also just presence to the moment, living in the now, whatever the now happens to be. Most of our psychosis comes from living in the past or the future. Peace. I mean, you don't have to like be a rocket scientist. Just imagine, you know, the last time you were running late for a flight in a previous world when that was a part of our life. And, you know, what was coursing through your body was anything but peace. So my point is that hurry is incompatible with the 3 central dispositions of the heart of a disciple of Jesus. And I think it is very much incompatible with the way of Jesus. I don't think we can live the way of Jesus at the Western pace of life.
Yeah, that's really, really good. So could you give us some, I guess, examples of what this hurry even look like? I know in your book, you've got like a list of 10 different things to almost diagnose if you have like hurry sickness or different things. And you don't have to go through all of them or anything like that, but like, what does this hurry look like on a day-to-day basis?
Well, I mean, the first thing that must be said is, hey, we're human. We live in a world this side of Eden. And there's no world where any of us are never in a hurry. And there even is a right and fitting place for speed, such as if you like get in a car wreck and you need to rush to, or whatever you called it. What was the name for a car wreck?
And you need a towing.
Exactly. Or you need to rush to the hospital, or your 2-year-old is running out into the middle of the street. Hurry out and get them, right?
Yeah.
But hurry is not just a life of speed. Like, the essence of hurry is not a lot to do. It's too much to do and not enough time. And hurry is a function of both the body and of the soul. And what I mean by that is it's a function of the body, like where your body is literally moving at too fast a pace. You don't have enough hours in the day to get through your responsibilities and all that you have to do. And that like neurobiological effect it has on you. But there's a deeper kind of hurry that is a function of like what Augustine, 4th century African, what he would have called disordered loves. Like a mentor of mine, John Ortberg, has this great line where he writes that hurry isn't just the sign of a disordered schedule, it's a sign of a disordered heart. And so often it's this sign that we're just rushing to perform an identity or to earn people's approval or to not let anybody get mad at us or to try to accomplish X, Y, and Z so that we can make a certain amount of money or be perceived a certain way or be thought of as cool or godly in such a way. And so often there's an external expression of hurry, which is just our body is going too fast because we have too much to do and not enough time. But then there's an internal expression of hurry where we can actually be sitting on the couch, looking out the window, but inside we're stressed about all of this stuff that we have to do. And we're not able to just be present to what is.
Yeah. And you talk a little bit about, things that, so like whatever you give your attention to is who you'll become. And that
I
seems
love that
like
line.
Whatever you give your time to will shape you. And so in amongst kind of, I saw what you said was there's a busyness, and you can be busy with good things and bad things or useless things sometimes, and then you can just have this state of hurry where, like you say, you've got way too much to do with the amount of time, the amount of resources, the strength and the power that you have, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But could you, like, what is some you in the book you talk about kind of like social media and the different things that distract us? Like, what could you identify just some of those kinds of things for us that take our time?
Yeah. I mean, obviously one of the objections that people have to kind of my invitation to a slower and a simpler kind of life is, well, I just don't have time for these, the second half of the book is all about practices such as silence and solitude and Sabbath and so on. I just don't have time for that. I'm a young parent, or I'm a pastor of a church, or I have a demanding job, or I'm a lawyer, or I mean, whatever. It's 1,000 different stories. And there's some truth in that. But the reality is that most of us have plenty of time. It's just that our time is incredibly porous, and it's easier to waste time now than it ever has been before. A great example would be how people spend their evenings. Most of us, and I will put myself on this list, waste huge amounts of our life in those kind of post-work, pre-bed hours where we're often just watching TV or scrolling the internet or, doing random things on social media. Just the stats on how many hours a day most people are on their devices is staggering. And we're talking about most people are on their iPhone, not work stuff. This is social media stuff. 2.5 hours a day. The average person watches 4 hours of TV or film a day. Right. So the reality is, if all we did was like stop watching TV and get off social media and limit it, we would probably gain the equivalent of like a part-time job in our life back, that we could give to any number of things, spiritual or just health or extra sleep or deep relationships So my point is that the first place to like make more time or get more time is by a really rigorous relationship to technology and entertainment. That's a way that a lot of us can all of a sudden grab huge swaths of time that create space for us to maybe reimagine our life and our way of life with Jesus.
Yeah, that's really, really good. What would you say then you kind of already answered one of my questions, but what would you say to the parent like yourself, who's studying, who's got a full-time job and has kids and just doing so much and still kind of doesn't have the time? How would you I guess pastorally care for them in this kind of sense?
Yeah, I mean, I would just start by asking questions, not by, offering solutions.
Yeah.
And I would want to explore, are you actually as busy as you think? That'd be the first place I would say. Or is a lot of your time going away to social media or film or shopping or, too many things? Second thing I would say is like, do you need to take a hard, long look at your life? And do you, rather than throw good money after bad, do you need to make some hard decisions to cut some things out of your life? And this is at the root, and we could come back to this and talk about it in a minute, of like the human condition, the Genesis view. Like one way of reading the Genesis temptation is as a temptation to transgress our limitations and our place in God's ordered sphere. We can come back to that if you want.
I would love to chat into that. That'd be awesome. Yeah.
Well, I mean, it's just, if you read Genesis as human beings have this unique position in the cosmos, that God's put them into this place, this well-ordered garden. He's called them to expand it. They have this role kind of under God, the creator, and over the creation. One way of thinking about the enemy's temptation, which is really subtle, it's like not a temptation to go murder somebody or steal money or lie, One way of, it's you shall be like gods if you take of this thing outside of your limits. One way of reading that is it's an attempt for them to become a part of the divine council, become like God, become more than a human being, to transgress the human limitations.
Yeah.
And, in Genesis, human beings have both potential and limitations. They're like, we're image of God. So we have this extraordinary potential in our DNA.
Yeah.
We're also cut from the dust. We're literally made out of dirt in the mythology and the beauty of the story. And so there's something profoundly human and finite and mortal. We live, we die. That's about what it means to be human.
Yep.
And we live in a culture, in particular, if you come from a Western middle class background, that says a ton about reaching our full potential, which I'm all for. I agree with that. I've written about that, but says little to nothing about accepting our limitations. And, that's where the enemy will often come into our heart. And if he can't, kind of under promote us, he'll over promote us. If he can't get us to just waste time on laziness, he'll often cause us to, overextend ourselves on activity.
Yeah.
And so I think we have to recognize there's some kind of a demonic even temptation behind the busyness of our day. And sometimes we have to come back. I had to do this, about a year ago with a commitment. I'm once you make a commitment, you follow through kind of guy, very much how I'm wired. But I'd enrolled into a doctoral program that I was all excited about. And there was a number of reasons I had to quit it. But one of them was realizing, man, I just at this stage of my life don't have the time. I can't do this and do the other things I've already committed to well. And that was really hard for me. It was embarrassing for me. It felt humiliating. It felt like I'm not tough enough, or I'm not measuring up enough. But it was the reality. And then the third thing I would say is, once you've gone through that first exercise of where are you wasting time, and then the second exercise of what do I actually need to cut out in order to live the way of Jesus, at some point there are just seasons that are hard. I'm in a season right now, it's really hard. I'm leading a church through a global pandemic in a city that's marked by social unrest. And it's just, this is not an easy, happy time. I'm in my rhythms of Sabbath and morning prayer, but I'm working more than I would like to work right now. I'm exhausted a lot of the time. And that's not necessarily because I'm on my phone. I'm actually barely not watching TV hardly at all. It's not that.
Yeah.
It's not because I can cut things out. It's because just right now there's a burden of responsibility on me that's really hard.
Yeah.
I can't do this long term, but I can, and I'm coming to the end. We've been in it for a year now, this pandemic, and I can't really keep living this way much longer. We're going to make it to spring, summer, and then we're just going to go on a long vacation and take a long break,
Sounds like you need
so my point is there are seasons that, you can't let the ideal of a unhurried life, sabotage the reality of an actual life, So you have to hold an unhurried life up as a vision without letting it become some kind of a tyrant where you feel that you're failing because you don't measure up.
Yeah. So it's more of it's a journey, and it's something that you strive for as well.
Yeah.
How do you talked just then about accepting your limitations, and I love that kind of idea, because you've said before that our culture just doesn't it's just you be everything you can be, and you shoot for the stars type thing. But I talk about limitations. So I kind of had a question for you of how do you kind of simultaneously strive forward to become better in what you're doing, or strive for the gospel whilst accepting your limitations at the same time? How do you hold them in balance?
Yeah, well, I find Jesus so compelling because he had an extraordinary impact on the world for the gospel, but Jesus left all sorts of things undone. He came and Israel was living under the oppression of the Roman Empire. He left and Israel was still living under the oppression of the Roman Empire.
Yeah.
He came and large swaths of Galilean peoples were living hand to mouth in poverty, and he left and large swaths of Galilean people were living hand to mouth in poverty,
Yeah.
He left behind a small band of people that were loyal to him in his way that grew, of course, over time. But there's just this remarkable capacity for Jesus to both serve and give himself away and suffering love, but then also to retreat and to pray and to rest. And when his time was come to do it, he at the end of his life, he said, "I've finished the work that the Father has given me to do."
Mm.
And I think a lot of us get confused between what's the work that the Father has given me to do and what's all of the work that was added on to me by the expectations of my culture or the inner voice in my head or my own ambition or ego or fear or grasping or materialism or careerism. And so I think the more time we can spend in prayer and in discernment with our closest friends and community, just asking God, like, what's the work that you've given me to do? Almost always my stress and hurry and overload comes from me taking on work that was not given to me by the Father. It was given to me by my own ego or fear, or overcommitment, or expectations of other people, or any number of things, you know? So I really, I do not think we are not God. We are not omnipotent. We are not omnipresent. We can't do all things. Yeah. All we can do is make our small, ordinary, mundane, human, finite contribution to the grand unfolding of God's kingdom. Mm. And when we're done, to just fade away and trust that we're a part of a story and a kingdom and a church that is so much bigger than any of us. Yes. And anything else than that is just ambition and ego and empire building masquerading as serving God, you know?
That's so good. Thank you, John. That's really insightful. You talk about the practice of silence in your book, and I think it's so needed. Like I had I just forgotten about it. Like, you know what I mean? I was so hurried, so like such a loud culture, so distracted.
I know.
And so, like, for me, this sounds like the thing, not like, I mean, one of the things that will just really help in giving clarity in our minds and our inner person and being able to actually hear God like you're talking about. But you talk about this practice being not just kind of going to a like a quiet place, which is part of that if you can do that. But you talk about kind of silencing like your inside, like your mind, and so. And what most people experience when they do this, and I know this is the case usually for me when I do it, is that when you kind of get into a silent spot and you're just not doing anything, you haven't got your phone buzzing every 2 seconds, like my brain's just still going round in circles and like thinking about all these different things. And like sometimes, I know you've said this before, but like anxiety and stress and sadness and some good emotions as well can come up. But my question is, how do you navigate that that kind of space so you don't just get discouraged and not do it again?
Well, I think first off, you have to normalize it. So it's absolutely, if you go into silence and solitude and your brain is all over and you're obsessing about how mad you are at your boss and you're thinking about how hurt you are because of somebody said, and you're feeling all this stress over something 3 days later, welcome to being a human being. That is 100% normal. Yep. And I can come back to this in a minute, but Jesus experienced something similar in his time in solitude in Matthew 4. The other thing I would say is some of that is actually a part of a very healthy process. So we get in trouble, especially for the introverted kind of type of people like myself. For us, solitude can easily become a narcissistic form of like me time. And so like Henry Nouwen has this great line that solitude is not a private therapeutic place. It is the place of conversion. So we err. There is, of course, an aspect to solitude that is restful and life-giving, especially for some of our personalities. But we err if we think the point of silence and solitude is to like go take a nap and have a little me time and just relax and feel great and then come back to the stress of life. Yeah. The Desert Fathers and Mothers, from whom much of the solitude tradition comes from, they all took Jesus in Matthew 4 and Luke 4 and the story of Jesus' temptation in the desert as their template for what they were doing when they literally went out in the deserts of Egypt and Syria
Yeah.
And when they read that story, they said that Jesus, here's that fascinating line in Luke, he was led by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And they're like, what the heck? Crazy line.
Yeah.
And so in their mind, like they were going into solitude to fight Satan. Like my son and I were in Ireland pre-pandemic, and we went and visited this island. It's a UNESCO World Heritage Site called Skellig Michael, which is where, if you've seen Star Wars, the new ones, it's where the Jedi Temple scenes were filmed with Luke and Rey. Yeah. So that's actually in real life, that's a island on the southeast corner of Ireland. It's the westernmost point of Europe. It's an ancient Augustinian monastery. It's over 1,000 years old. Those huts that are in the movie are actual monastic huts that are over 1,000 years. Wow. I mean, I'm sure they made some set ones that they could blow up and stuff, but there are those huts. They're there. And you can go sign up and tour it. And it's really interesting. They named it Skellig Michael. Skellig is a Gaelic word for rock formation or something like that. And Michael, they named after Michael, the archangel in the book of Revelation, because he's the one who goes to fight Satan. And they would go out there to what was the westernmost point of Europe on behalf of the church all through Europe, to fight Satan and to hold back the waters of chaos. From this before anybody knew about what we now think of as North America, to hold back the waters of chaos and fight Satan in prayer on behalf of Europe. Wow. So like that's a whole other way of thinking about solitude. Like I'm going to go to this solitude place and I'm going to fight Satan. But that's how many followers of Jesus thought about silence and solitude. It was the place. And in particular, if you read like Evagrius of Ponticus, who maybe you've never heard of, that's fine. He's like one of my favorite Christian thinkers right now, 4th century, out in the north of Egypt, brilliant intellectual, wrote this book called A Monastic Handbook for Combating Demons. Brilliant book.
What a title.
True story. What a title. What a title. Brilliant story. What he did, and he really articulated it incredibly well, and this tradition lives on in the Eastern Orthodox Church and other veins of the church. They called it counter-talking. There was a Greek word for it. I forget what it was, anti-theresis or something, but they called it talking back or counter-talking. And the way that they read the Matthew 4, Luke 4 narrative of Jesus in the desert is about the inner dialogue that goes on in your mind when your mind is not occupied by a task or a TV show or what we're doing right now on Zoom. Yep. And the flow of consciousness through your mind stream. And they would argue that the primary way the devil comes to attack us is through thoughts in our mind that penetrate from the outside. They called them the logosmai in Greek, or the thought patterns, or the words, or the kind of narrative things that go on in our mind. There's these inner videos that play in our mind when we're driving in our car or we're trying to read our Bible and pray. And instead we're thinking about how we would look in this outfit, or how dare this person say this to me the other day, or will she text me back? Or what if I get this other job opportunity? You know what I mean? All these inner videos that swirl through our mind. And they read that story as a way of a model of Jesus, where when these thoughts would come into his mind, rather than engage in the mental, and they would say demonic chatter and internal dialogue, Jesus refused to get caught up in the internal dialogue. Instead, what Jesus was doing by quoting scripture was just turning his mind back to truth rather than engaging with the devil. So they took this as basically the overarching paradigm for what we now call contemplative prayer, which was basically a way to turn your mind to truth back and back. So Evagrius, in his monastic handbook for combating demons, he's the one that we get the idea of the 7 deadly sins from, that comes from this book. Yeah. And so he would take a category like anger or lust or greed, and he would have all of these different thoughts. And then he would say, against the thought of, and then he would put a scripture to replace it. So every time that thought came into his mind, he would just, rather than think about it, give into it, let the video play in his mind, he'd just turn to the scripture. So I've actually been working on this for my own life, my own like little mini monastic handbook for combating demons, which is pretty cool. I'm loving it.
That the next
it's not nearly as
it's
actually in the next book. I do have a new book coming out, and I have a little appendix on this in the back. Awesome. But true story. But so I've been like thinking about this. So against the thought of and then I'm making a list of afflictive thoughts that come back to me on a regular basis. So like one of my fears right now and the anger of the online world is, cancel culture, that I'll get attacked by an online mob, or I won't be able to preach the gospel in public anymore. Or the laws will change. Like whether these are rational or not, these are fears that I feel as a pastor in a very secular, progressive, hostile city. And so like, in this case, it's not a scripture I come back to. It's a word I've been meditating on from my spiritual director, who said there are no barriers to use joyfully serving God forever. And I love that thought, because it means I could be fired tomorrow for preaching the gospel. I could be canceled. I could have to get a job doing something else. And it would not serve me from joyfully serving God. It would not stop me from joyfully serving God forever. So when those thoughts come, rather than give in to the inner videos of what if the Supreme Court does this? What if that happens? What if I get attacked by this new Instagram account? What if What if my sermon from last Sunday causes people to hate me? Rather than giving in to all those internal videos, which lead to anger and fear, and then grasping for control and hurting people rather than loving them, I just turn my mind. There is no barrier to me joyfully serving God forever.
So good.
And so I think that's what a lot of silence and solitude is. It's learning to discipline our mind stream to take on the flow of consciousness that we see in Jesus.
Oh, that's so good. Loved that. I wanted to switch a little bit over to Sabbath just for a minute. So I wanted to kind of hear how you would even define Sabbath rest, because I know it might sound funny, or it probably doesn't, but I think it's actually a fairly foreign concept to many people. Like you think of, at least in Australia, and I think it would be the same in America, like shops are actually open on a Sunday. Like most Gen Z don't even have a memory of that, like I do.
Yes.
I'm a millennial. So it's this concept of actually resting as a society is pretty not on our radar. So I wondered if you could define that a little bit, and what do you even do on a Sabbath? Like, is it just 24 hours straight of praying and meditating and just reaching this kind of like Zen state, or like what do you even do on a Sabbath?
Yes, that's me. Just Christian Zen all Sabbath long. No, I mean, Sabbath is similar to silence and solitude. Part of what happens on Sabbath, and it is a day of great delight, but is that all of the emotions you've been running away from and suppressing through busyness and entertainment and alcohol, or whatever your work, church, whatever your things are, they all finally start to catch up to you, and you're forced to feel what you don't want to feel, and let it pass through you in a healthy way. And this is actually, it's not necessarily pleasant, but it's actually really healthy and beautiful part of what silence and solitude does, what Sabbath does, what prayer often does for us. But yeah, I'm the same as you. Like I did, first off, I don't know when it changed in Oz, but in America, it's before my time, where Sunday has long been like an American day for shopping and football, not for rest and worship. My dad's generation, for sure, everything was closed on Sunday. It was illegal to run businesses on Sunday. A large population of the church of America went to some form of church. American church going was at its highest in 1962, when my dad would have been 12. So like he grew up in a world where there was almost a cultural architecture of Sabbath. That world, of course, is swallowed up not just by secularism, but by Silicon Valley and the iPhone and Instagram and shopping and marketing and sports and all the things, So yeah, there's no cultural memory for our generation and below at all of Sabbath. And I grew up in a church tradition where there was actually a really high value for Sunday as more than just church. Like we called it the Lord's Day. And there was a little bit of a value, like this day is special and it's unique. And this is a day for church, and we would go to church twice on a Sunday in the tradition I came up in. So there was a little bit something, but it wasn't Sabbath and how I think about Sabbath now. And so when I was first introduced to the concept, it blew my mind. And my first thought was like, Sabbath, isn't that like a thing for Jews and Seventh-day Adventists and not like for Christians, right? And I didn't even realize that most Christians from every single denomination and stream and vein of the church all would use the language of, and for sure the practice of Sabbath up until like the 1950s, basically, you know, and it was lost in like one generation with almost no thought as a society. So, I mean, I talk about Sabbath through 4 movements. All 4 of these are different ways to translate the Hebrew word Shabbat that we read in Genesis 2.
Yep.
You know, so it's stopping, it's resting, it's delighting, and it's worshiping. So stopping, the word Sabbath literally means to stop, to cease. So we stop working, we stop thinking about work, you know. We like, there's all sorts of science on when you even just think about a stressful situation about work, it releases the same chemicals into your body as if you're actually in the stressful situation. We stop wanting. It's a day to celebrate what we have, not what we wish we had. In traditional Jewish and Christian culture, you don't buy or sell on the Sabbath as a way to index your heart toward gratitude and delight and contentment. Second, it's about resting. You know, resting your body, resting your mind, resting emotionally, even resting spiritually. Interesting, in the Orthodox Jewish tradition, and they just have like something 4,000 years of like wisdom on how to do this well. They actually don't, this is really interesting. They don't do any intercessory prayer. They pray, but not any intercessory prayer on the Sabbath, because they view intercession as a form of work, which I actually think is right biblically. And you don't work on the Sabbath. So they'll pray on the Sabbath, but they don't like do intercession on the Sabbath. They do that on the other days of the week. Really interesting.
Yeah.
So there's even kind of, I'm not saying you shouldn't ask God for things on the Sabbath. I'm just saying that's an interesting perspective. So it's, you rest. Third is delight. It's a day to just literally, it's a day of joy. It's a day to just completely turn yourself to the goodness of your life before God, through practices of gratitude, through feasting together, through community, life and relationships, through doing what's life-giving. I always just say something like, what's the most life-giving? And not like fun entertainment stuff, but like what's actually life-giving for your soul? Is it walking in the woods? Is it having coffee with your best friend? Is it cooking? Is it listening to music and having a dance party? Is it worshiping at church? Like, where do you just come alive with God? You know, psychologists have this term pleasure stacking, which is where like what we intuitively do for our birthday or anniversary or Christmas, where we like put a bunch of things we all love. We're going to do it all together. It's going to be the most amazing every day. We're going to go to brunch here, and then we're going to get coffee here, and then we're going to go here, and then we're going to see this movie, then we're going to do this thing, we're going to buy this thing. It's going to be able to put all the great things together. It's going to be the best day ever. So like we intuitively do that on special occasions. And so like we
that the other day for my wife.
Exactly. Well done. Good husbanding. So Sabbath is like a day for pleasure stacking. You know what I mean? We save all of these things for Sabbath at our house, you know? And then finally, and most importantly, it's a day for worshiping. It's not just a day to like kick back and have fun and eat good food and be with your friends. You know, in biblical language, it's a day that's holy to the Lord, or set apart for the Lord, or dedicated to the Lord. It's not just a day to not work. It's an intentional day that you give over to whole life orientation to the goodness of God. And in that sense, you know, Sabbath is like, if you're thinking, but isn't all of life about worship of God? Yes. But think of Sabbath the way that we think of all spiritual disciplines, almost like training wheels to a bike, or like scales to learning the piano, or drills to learning soccer, or fill in your example of choice. It's a discipline that is, you know, it's a 24-hour time period, once a week discipline of rest, by which we cultivate a spirit of restfulness and worship and God orientation all 7 days of the week, which is the Walter Brueggemann line. You know, people who keep Sabbath live all 7 days differently. And so that's always my warning to people, like, don't be careful with Sabbath. It will mess with you. If you want your life to just stay the same, don't Sabbath. It won't just change one day of your week. It'll change your whole life.
That's so good.
Or God through that practice will change your whole life.
Yeah. It's a good change. I have probably one more question before I want to chat to you about your book. This one's a bit of a personal question for me, but I know it'll help many pastors, but people in similar situations as well. So I'm a youth and young adults pastor at the church that I'm at. And but you talk about, it's on the topic of Sabbath rest, and I know just from listening to you and reading some of your stuff that you have a Sabbath on Saturday, and you almost do this prep for Sabbath.
Yes.
So I wanted to know firstly, how do you prepare for Sabbath? But more importantly, and maybe the question isn't quite right, and then you can just call me out on it. But more importantly, I just want to know, how do you kind of leave everything at the door in a sense? Like particularly you were even talking about how crazy things are at the moment. And I'm sure like even for myself, when I get to like my Sabbath day, me and my wife usually take off on like a Wednesday. I've got so many things just going through my mind, like people that I care about and love, and that something's happening over here, or like, oh man, I still got to write my sermon, or like I've got to do this and this and this, and like it's hard to rest at times. It's gotten easier over time, but being that you're in a similar situation, probably way more busy than I am, or the stress level is probably even higher for you at the moment. But I wanted to hear, how do you prepare for Sabbath, and then how do you deal with all the stuff that goes on throughout kind of the other 6 days of the week?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. I mean, first off, I want to be really careful here not to create a fantasy kind of illusion of what Sabbath is. So Sabbath isn't a day when you're never unhappy and you're just walking around laughing all of the time and everything is wonderful and you're in Zen-like awesomeness. Like, I mean, we're human, you know? And of course we carry stress and pain and into our Sabbath. And of course our mind tends to go to things after. In fact, my last Sabbath, which was wonderful, but I was exhausted. The last couple of weeks have been really hard with some leadership stuff. And I went into it exhausted. I was just I wasn't nearly as happy as I normally am on it. And the following day, Sunday, I had to give this super intense, really hard to give teaching at our church.
Yeah, right.
And I was just like carrying that weight in a sense before of like, how mad are people going to get at me? And like, how's this going to go? And how's this going to be received? And, so, I just want to normalize like that we're human, and that actually means we need Sabbath more, not less. That's not like a counter argument. Well, we don't really need Sabbath. It's like the opposite, it shows us how much we do need it.
100%.
Other thing I would say is, our Sabbath is really spacious. So there's lots of white space in our Sabbath. It's not scheduled, beyond basic things, which gives space for all of these thoughts and stresses and emotions to kind of come up in our heart and mind and kind of pass through. Yeah. So there'll be often like a long time of morning prayer when I'm processing my fears, anxieties, stresses. Normally my wife and I will have a long kind of conversation where we're just kind of processing pain and stuff, and it'll just kind of come out and get through us. And then we'll often feel like a lot better on the backside of that, And the last thing I'd say is, the miracle of the human body that the enemy uses against us is what, scientists call the automatic responses of our body. So our body carries these like muscle memory in us at an unconscious level that enables it to just do naturally things that once took a lot of effort. So a great example would be driving a car or riding a bike. Yeah. We don't have to when we first did those things, they were very hard. They required a high level of attention and focus and discipline and skill. And we were bad at it. We eventually got good at it. But now our body has memorized how to ride a bike or how to drive a car or how to talk or how to speak English or how to fill in the blank. And so now we do these things with almost no conscious effort. They just almost like sometimes you're driving in a car and you realize you just drove across town and didn't even think about where you were because your mind was somewhere else, which is a little terrifying. This is the miracle of the human body. This is also how sin lives on in our body, because our body memorizes patterns of sin. Patterns of sin are even passed down to our genetic code by our parents and our grandparents and our great-grandparents. And how do we get this? How do we get sin out of the muscle memory of our body? That's a key task of discipleship to Jesus. Yeah. But the gift of these automatic responses is what's really hard at first, eventually just is so woven into us and our body just remembers. And so my body knows when Sabbath is coming.
Yeah.
And it knows that the afternoon before Sabbath, we start at night, it is really stressful because we're like getting all the things done and finishing answering my text messages and powering off the things and running errands. And I got to do this thing and I got to meet my, like all the things, cleaning the house. And then it has this moment of just like, and it just, I will naturally like fall asleep at 9 o'clock on Friday night because I just, my body will just naturally just like fall asleep really early because every Friday night I go to bed really early because there's no TV, there's no entertainment, there's no digital stuff. I'm wiped from the week and I just sleep. And I can't say enough good about starting Sabbath at night. There's lots of reasons that the best advice says to start at night. But all that to say, there's something to that. And the last thought is learning theorists talk about what they call a J curve. You're by an internet browser, just Google J curve image and it'll come right up. But if you can imagine like a graph with 2 axis point, one is time and the other is like difficulty and proficiency. What happens when you start to learn a new skill is you actually get worse at it. It goes down first, bottoms out, then comes back up to the middle where it started, and then goes up to get better. So an easy analogy, like if anybody's a musician, when I first started playing guitar was in like I'm old enough that I learned to play guitar from people, not from YouTube. And like you couldn't just Google, you had to like actually find a person and they had like, show me a chord, or show me a new part, show me a new lick or whatever. So like most first-time guitarists who didn't have a teacher or YouTube, the intuitive thing is if you have a pick is you just down pick every note, down, 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 down as you're playing a lick or a riff. And how you're actually supposed to do it is down, up, down, up, down, up. And so I remember this guy told me, oh, you're doing it wrong. And if you only do down, you'll never be able to play very well and your speed will be limited. You have to go down, up. So then I decided, all right, I'm going to learn how to pick proper form, which is down, up, down, up, down, up. And I remember it was so frustrating because I got way worse at guitar. I was like just getting okay. And all of a sudden, all of these like songs and riffs that I could play, now I started to miss notes and I played slow and I was clumsy and I felt terrible at it. It was hard, took all this work and attention. But then eventually I got back to where I was and then I got way better. So often what happens with Sabbath is like people are like, I already have a day off. I already go to church on Sunday and I like Sundays and I like midday off and it's good. So that was a Sabbath thing. And then they'll actually try to do it and it'll feel like relearning how to pick. And all of a sudden all this, they'll go down, they'll get worse. I'll be like, that was a horrible day. I got in a fight with my wife. I was anxious about all these things. I was mad at all these people that hurt me during the week. I just kept reaching for my phone. It was horrible. Why would I do this again? And then people will stop right at the bottom of the J curve. And I'm like, just stay with it. Give it time to get into your muscle memory. And if you it took us years, not weeks, years. Give it time. And your body will begin to just remember these extraordinary life-giving rhythms of stopping, resting, delighting, and worshiping.
And I guess it does make sense that it would be kind of hard if you don't actually do it. And I know this for a fact that when me and my wife started doing it, it actually was hard. Like we did have like little fights. So much came to the surface that we're like, I don't even know thinking about this. Like, so it is kind of like, oh, we should be enjoying this day, but like, it should be nice. But I love what you've said. It's just like, it is a journey and it's like the kind of the perception that it's going to be perfect and fun and dandy and rainbows everywhere is a myth, but it's so worth it.
And we have to remember, as much as I love Sabbath and it is a joyful day for me, the point of Sabbath, like the point of all spiritual disciplines, is not to feel good and be happy. It's to become people of love. And that's why, solitude, for example, for introverts can be an act of narcissism, not an act of discipleship to Jesus. 100%. Like Sabbath is not a virtue. Solitude's not a virtue. They are disciplines by which we cultivate the virtues. The virtues are love, joy, peace, patience, kindness, goodness, gentleness, faithfulness, self-control. Sabbath, silence and solitude, prayer will cultivate these disciplines, but will cultivate these virtues. But these disciplines are not virtues. I'm not more godly if I have quiet prayer or more godly if I Sabbath.
Yeah.
I'm more godly if I'm more godlike, if I'm more loving, you know?
Good.
So we can't define success as I had a great day and I was really happy.
Yeah.
Though I do think that Sabbath tends to become the best day of the week.
Yeah.
But success is over a long period of time, over years and decades, through the practice of Sabbath, I'm becoming a less hurried, more rested, more loving, gentle, patient, compassionate person. That's success.
That's so good. Thank you so much. That was so enlightening. I loved that. I want to take just the last bit of our time together to talk about your new book. I didn't actually know that you had it. Like, I knew it like a couple of months ago, but I was just searching for another book of yours, Garden City, because I hadn't read that one yet. And I saw on Amazon that there was Live No Lies, Resisting the World, the Flesh, and the Devil in the Modern Age. And I was like, oh, yeah, buddy, it's going to be so good. So I wondered if you could tell us a little bit about that book and what kind of led you to write that.
Yeah, I didn't even realize it was on Amazon yet. We haven't even like finished the cover, and the subtitle just changed. And
oh, really?
Yeah, that's amazing that you found that. Yes, I have a book coming out on September 22nd. Yeah. It is called Live No Lies. The updated subtitle is Recognize and Resist the Three Enemies That Sabotage Your Peace. It is my attempt to kind of update the ancient Christian paradigm of the world, the flesh, and the devil, or what ancient Christians called the three enemies of the soul. Yeah. For those of us living in a Brisbane or a Portland or a very secular kind of sophisticated world that doesn't really even believe in those things anymore, much less have a robust kind of grasp of them. And it really, the whole book's not about this, but the kind of tip of the spear is about the role of lies in our society and our soul and how they sabotage and deform and destroy us. There's a psychologist I love named David Benner, who has this great line. He writes, the problem is not so much that we tell lies, but that we live them. Oh. And so a bunch of the book is about Evagrius of Ponticus, about the desert, and about how lies about who God is, about who we are, about what the good life is, come into our mind and begin to destroy us from the inside out. And the tragedy is that what start out as lies often become true. You know, if I start to hear the lie that, you know, you're not worthy of success, or your marriage is not going to make it, or everybody is mad at you, or you don't have a call here. If I then begin to believe that lie and I begin to live that lie, then tragically what was started out as a demonic lie from the enemy, it's not even true, can actually start to become true of my life. Yeah, right. And so it's about unmasking the lies of the enemy that take root in our mind and are often like co-opted by what the Bible calls our flesh and normalized by what the scripture calls the world. So anyway, it's a really intense book. I don't know what it's going to do, but yeah, I'm excited about it.
What, can I ask you one more question? What kind of led you specifically to write that book? Because obviously you're a busy guy, and it doesn't take like 2 days to write a book. It takes quite a while.
Yeah,
so like, what was your motivation? Like, why this particular topic?
You know, just, I think living and serving as a pastor in a just incredibly secular city, an incredibly progressive city, and seeing so many people deconstruct their faith as millennials and walk away from anything remotely resembling orthodoxy and often and most of the time from Jesus himself. And just the sadness in my spirit over that. And seeing that the idolatry of our era really is ideology on both the left and the right. And of course, I'm speaking as an American. I know it's very different in your context. And so forgive me for my American centricity at times. Yeah. And so really it's my manifesto for how do we stay true to the way of Jesus in a super secular, and for most of us, very progressive, not all of us, some people, the opposite problem, kind of culture. And how do we flourish here and find deep life in God? And I've also just pastorally been I've become really interested in what some call inner healing prayer, the healing of memories, and the role of trauma in our spiritual formation and how it sabotages God's will for our life. And I've just become so pastorally aware of how many of us are living in bondage to lies, internal narratives that are sabotaging God's call in our life. And and the need to expose those lies and get free. I mean, when Jesus said, you will know the truth and the truth will set you free, he was simultaneously saying that we are in bondage to lies. And there are external lies kind of from the culture and the culture wars and secularism and progressivism or conservatism. And then there are internal lies from our trauma, our experience, our family of origin, demonic input into our own mind. And Jesus wants us free of those lies to just flourish and live in his peace. So I want that for me. I want that for more people. Wow. That's what the book's about.
That's so good. I can't wait to read it. So thank you, John Mark, for coming on the podcast. I really, again, appreciate you giving of your time. How can we support you, like through book sales or just in general? How can we support you?
Oh, that's backwards. You're so kind. You don't need to support me. If any of my work is helpful, you're welcome to it. There's a website under my name. I do have books out, and you're welcome to listen to the Bridgetown Church podcast. But no, man, I'm just here to serve however I can and keep up the great work, man. I love that you're hosting these conversations. The questions that you're asking are the questions of our time, you know, and so it's the pastoral call. So well done.
Yeah. Thanks, John. Do you prefer John Mark or John?
I go by John Mark, actually. It's so funny when people know me as a writer first, you know, they often call me John. I'm like, well, who are you talking to? It's because, you know, writers often put their middle name in, but I didn't name myself. My parents named me John Mark before I had a choice in it. And it's always been that. So okay. I go by John Mark.
Awesome. Yes. Well, thank you, John Mark.
Yes, you bet.
A really great rest of your, night for you. And I'll, I look forward to chatting to you soon.
You bet. Peace to you, Matt. Take care.
Sweet. Well, I hope you all enjoyed that. I'm proud of you for getting through an hour-long video. That was good. I hope you got a lot out of it. For those of you at home, we're going to put up a couple of questions just to help facilitate some conversation to help you think through these things. Like I said, we want to be proactive in doing stuff with what we're actually given. It's not good enough just to listen and do nothing with it. We want to actually follow through with that. And for us here, we're going to go head over to the hall. Night hasn't quite finished yet, and we have some food, and then we're going to get into like table talks and have a bit of sharing time there. But thank you for coming, and I'll catch you next time.